Welcome to Infinite Models. If you like building aircraft, any type of armor, how about prehistoric or current wildlife? Autos of all shapes and sizes and genres, seafaring subjects of all types, and figures, vignettes, and dioramas, then this group was made for you.
How do you decide what subject or which model to build next? What is it that motivates you on your subjects? Go ahead, give me some input down there. Let's leave some comments. Jonathan says other groups, but no better groups. Alex Drake, Alex knows of a few other groups because Alex runs like 9 of them, for crying out loud. He's got scale model helicopters, scale model ski boats. He's got scale model ships. He's got scale model spacecraft. He's got scale model rotor blades and helicopters, scale model skids. I mean, Alex runs like 9 different groups, for crying out loud. And Kel says peer pressure. All right. So what is it that motivates you to pick your next subject? Craig Sirwa says, I just pick one. That's the simplest way to do it, Craig. Just pick one. Andrew Lemon, the first on that calls my name. The first on that calls my name. Help me out, Andrew. What was that alluding to? Steve, a subject that is not run-of-the-mill like tractors or ancillary stuff. And your build that you've got going right now on 135th, pretty cool, Steve. I'm admiring those things. And Paula says, what motivates me? Well, first I check if I have the Edward canopy masks. All right, somebody who hates masking canopies. Okay, so what are the things that motivate me? Alex says, whatever trips my trigger is what I build. So, you know, some guys, you may be reading a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and subject matter within there will motivate you. Andrew says, one from my stash. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Steve, and a beer. Douglas, it can be from a current book I'm reading. There you go. Or maybe a movie I just watched. Good feedback. Bo Van Lee, he's saying the first one. Okay. We are both having strokes together with our typing tonight. Bo and Andrew are wrestling the keyboard and losing. I'm glad you guys take that with a sense of humor. Stanley George, whatever trips my trigger is what I build. That sums it up for him. Okay. Steve Hat, I always have those, and the beer. Okay. Well, I tell you what. I've been pulling the string on some more of my father's stories that he told me when I was a young man, growing up, about my grandfather. And I've told you guys the stories about Grandpa going through flight school and like getting a court-martial for buzzing the commander over the lake in North Carolina, and then flying A-26s in Korea. I told you the story of skipping off the front of a North Korean train and bringing the bell home wedged in the belly of his invader. What other stories have I told you about my grandpa? Did I tell you the one about pucker string when they almost ran out of fuel? I can't remember if I told you that story. Give me a comment if I told the story about almost running out of fuel over Korea in an A-26. I'll have to tell you that story. Jonathan says personal interest or historical significance, or it looks cool, or I'm bored. Jonathan has a lot of ors. Personal interest or significant, or it's cool, or I'm bored. Okay, so you know, the motivation for me to make this monogram A4 Skyhawk was because a friend wanted the Blue Angels in A4s. That's his favorite version, and he asked me to build this for him, so I did. Jonathan, not heard that one. Bill Moore, nope. Okay, so I'm going to have to tell that story next week. I'll tell you the story about a little Grim Reaper pucker string was kind of the name of that story. And Alex Drake says, go put in hack for buzzing one admiral's... got put in hack for buzzing one admiral's daughter. And love the story about the bell, says Christopher Crow. Yeah, so do I. greatest thing ever. So that was the motivation for building that A4. A friend of mine wanted it. You guys know the motivation was the story of the bell in the belly of the A26. So that's what got me started on this guy, and it's been sitting in the same condition since last October. I really got to get back on this. So that was the motivation for that one. My little scene here from the Rogue One, this guy, a group build inspired me to work on that. But I've been doing some more string pulling this week, and Douglas says, really enjoy the stories about your granddad's service in Korea. I'm going to tell you one about Vietnam tonight. My father told me a story that my grandfather told him a long time ago when I was just a wee bald-faced boy, and I've heard the story several times over the years, and I've always wanted to kind of pull the string on that story. What was the kind of plane? What was the squadron? What were they doing? And Paula says, you do get all those. Yes, I do. And Christopher, I love the dinos too, man. I got them all over the place over here. And that's why when Kel printed me that T-Rex skull, had to do it, man. So I was going through, it's a really pretty box. It has a picture of my grandfather and my grandmother in the front from when they were young. Great little picture. And it's about the size of a cigar box, and it's full of just different things from his time in service. And it wasn't on purpose. I think he just kind of, frankly, tossed shit in there because he didn't have anywhere else to put it. And in there was this patch for a squadron he was in. This is all I knew. The 84th ATS. And the 84th ATS is the Air Transport Squadron. And it later became the MATS, the Military Air Transport Squadron. Military Airlift Squadron. And it was under the Military Airlift Command, MAC. And so I'm going, military airlift, that surely, and this looked to me about Vietnam age, and graphics for a patch. So I was thinking this may be the patch for the squadron that Grandpa flew, where the story came from. So I was pulling that string, and hey, Gene, you're not too tardy, man. Welcome to the party. And so I started pulling that string, and I'm Googling the 84th ATS, and it comes up with 84th Mass. And so about the third item I click is a PDF, and it's a history of the 84th Mass, and it's got the lineage, and it talks about how they were the ATS, and they were in Great Falls, Idaho, and then Travis Air Force Base, California, which is in San Francisco area. And the last one here brings the beer. But I pulled this thing up, and this is the very first page of about a 25-page document. And look, right there, Commanders, Lieutenant Colonel Vince Mankowski. This is on the front page of the document that when I clicked and opened it, and I went, get out of here. I find this squadron patch. I go figure out what the squadron is, and my grandpa's the #1 listed CO on the page, their squadron history. He wasn't just any guy for the squadron. He was the CO. So this has nothing to do with the story. I'll get to that. But he went to this 84th Mass, and I just printed a couple of pages that happened to be in the era when he was the CO. And Alex Drake says, wound up flying cargo aircraft full of dog doo-doo out of Hong Kong. So get ready to eat those words, Alex. I want to share this with you guys. It blew me completely out of the water. So 15 April 1969, Lieutenant Colonel Vince Mankowski takes command of the 84th Mass. And then they listed some of the accomplishments, things they did while he was the commanding officer. May 1969, a month after he became the CO, they transported the Apollo 10 vehicle, Charlie Brown was its name, from Hickam to Long Beach, so it could be paired with the rockets. 30 July 69, Apollo support for Mission 84, as Apollo Command Module Columbia was delivered by C-133Bs from Hickam to Ellington. This was the moon landing mission. They transported them. I know he took it. I know you took that from Top Gun. I'll have you flying rubber dog shit out of Guam. I know. But I don't take insult. That's why I said, just get ready to eat those words. And that was not insulting either. I didn't take offense, Alex. Not me. I'm far too thick-skinned. But this, okay. So your comment, no offense. I didn't take any, honestly. But I can see how people would think you go from A-26s and, attack aircraft, low flying, down in the weeds, scooting and shooting with bad guys, to flying a great big frickin' transport. That has got to be incredibly boring by comparison. That was my thought. So here, I got to tell you, why am I sharing this with you? Chris Mickish, who's a very good friend of mine. I know I've met his father, Robert Mickish, who flew A-26s in Korea. Matter of fact, his bird Moni is on the cover of the Airfix kit and his nose art for Robert Mickish. Chris Mickish, his son, good friend of mine. He used to run Nostalgic Plastic, and he sold that to Jeff Garrity, a rare plane detective guy out in California now. And his business is Rare Plane Detective and Nostalgic Plastic, because he bought that. Well, when Chris Mickish was running Nostalgic Plastic, he commissioned folks and they handmade and patterned a C-133 kit in resin that came with all the parts to make an A or a B in 144 scale. And it came with a CD-ROM full of hundreds of walk-around and interior photographs, because Chris Mickish negotiated a deal with the folks at Dover Air Force Base to get access to the C-133A and B they had on the flight line there, inside and out, full thing. Detail photos, the likes of which you've never seen, are on that CD. So Chris comes to me and goes, hey man, we're doing this project, doing the C-133s out of Dover. Would you be interested in one? And I went, yeah, thanks man, but not really. Kind of honestly, in hindsight, kind of a snooty reply. Here's a friend of mine, and a good friend to boot, doing this project, probably a very passionate thing for him. And I went, nah, they don't really blow my skirt up. Fast forward 20 freaking years later, and I discover my grandfather was the CO of the squadron flying the damn things, supporting Apollo lunar landing missions. Like, have you ever had one of those moments where you look back and go, geez, I am such an idiot? This was my moment this week. So I just want to share some more of these with you, right? August of '69, 84th Mass airlifts 6 emergency generators from Sacramento, California to Gulfport, Mississippi, supporting people from the recovery of Hurricane Camille. By mid-'69, the 84th Mass had provided airlift support to 5 consecutive Apollo space missions, Apollos 7 through 11. October of '69, and this one blew me away, the heaviest ever, now mind you, this is a turboprop, not a jet. This is a turboprop airplane. The C-133, serial number 90522, airlifts the heaviest ever operational load. It carried a Minuteman ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, in a shipping container from Hill Air Force Base, Utah to Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. The total gross weight of that cargo was 89,776 pounds. First one moved by airplane like that. December '69, Apollo 12 lunar capsule, Yankee Clipper, transported for its launch. Airlift relief equipment and helicopters flown to Lima, Peru to support recovery from an earthquake. And then they did Operation Reforger 2, moving elements of the 11th Infantry Division from Fort Riley, Kansas to England and Germany. And 84th Mass. I discovered all this stuff because I found a patch in like virtually a cigar box of stuff that my grandpa just tossed crap into. Guess what I want to build now? That's right. I want to build, I I'm tracking a Rodin C-133A and B on eBay. And I even found one of those nostalgic plastic resin ones. And amazingly, because when they came out, they were like $85. And last time I looked at one that came up in my searches, because I keep a search on 144 scale aircraft, it was like $200 because they've been out of production for so long and they're rare. And I was telling my wife, and I went, I'm not going to pay $200 for this model, but you know, I am now motivated to build it, and never before in my life. My friend offered me one, and I turned my nose up at it, and here I am 20 years later, I'm going, I want to build one of those. My grandpa was the CO of that squadron during some very exciting times, supporting some just absolutely incredible NASA and whatnot missions, world relief for people, you know, hurricane relief and earthquake relief. Just shocking. Stanley says your grandpa was he was a very interesting man. I bet he was fun to be around. Yeah, he was an interesting cat. I've told people when I grew up, my dad was harder than woodpecker lips. He was a hard man to grow up under, had very, very high standards. My grandpa, my dad's stories about him growing up, even worse. I couldn't imagine him as my father. But his grandpa, he was CO. He was directing all of those kind of flights. Okay, but still, we didn't get to the squadron and the aircraft type. That's what I was searching for the story that came from Vietnam. So I want to tell you this story, and then I'm going to tell you what's happened since then. All of that, because I heard the story, I found this just stupid patch that was cut off one of his uniforms. That was my discovery here. Absolutely amazing. So you will see me, guys, in the near future. I'm going to be building a C-133, and I'm going to do it in markings from Travis Air Force Base. And I know that not only was my grandpa the CO, but as the CO, he would not, you know, well, they didn't have assigned aircraft stateside in those times, but they flew what was up, right, and on the mission. So chances are, as CO, he probably had the opportunity to fly every plane in the squadron there. So I can build just about any serial number from Travis, and my grandpa operated it. One thing I wish I had to this day was his flight logbook. I don't have that. I wish I had that. So that's what got me there. I found this to be just amazing stuff. And it started kind of the wheels turning in my head. So I wonder what you guys do. What motivates you to select your next subject? So I'm just sharing with you. I'm going to go find a C-133B, and I'm in this thing. I didn't read you all the boring stuff, but for instance, the Yankee Clipper, right? The Lunar 12 module. It tells you the serial number and the name of all the guys on the crew who made that flight. The Minuteman ICBM was 90522, and you know, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Harold K. Hoskins, with LM's loadmasters, Master Sergeant Norman C. King, Staff Sergeant Raymond Simmons, and other crew members were Major Victor Werda as the command pilot, Tech Sergeant Williams Laws, and Donald Athen as the FET. I'll have to figure out what that. So all that stuff is in here. So I can go back and I can model the plane that lifted the Apollo 12 or one of the Apollo 7 through 11. And my grandpa was the CO of the squadron when they did that. I just thought that was so cool. So Gordon Sorensen found my dad's logbook from when he was in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Very cool. Planning on building some of the aircraft he flew. And that's where I'm at. Gordon, see, now that is perfect motivation for selecting your model subjects, right? Okay, let me tell you the story. My grandpa, when he went to Vietnam, all I knew before my research was that he was in an observation squadron. I don't know what he flew. I don't know what he flew on. I don't know. He was just in an observation squadron. And he told this story. When the squadron had several missions: forward air control, artillery gunfire liaison for the Navy ships, and ship firing. They would do forward air control and naval gunfire spotting. They did the same thing, forward air controlling and gunfire spotting for cannon cockers, the 11th Marine Division, Army, like the 10th Mountain, and guys that had cannons. They do that kind of spotting. They did bomb damage assessment flights. They did reconnaissance flights. They would do scout missions. And so there was all kinds of stuff that they did, and all of it was done low and slow. And the aircraft were, these were not armed airplanes, although they could mount like smoke rockets and some high explosives, but one under each wing. Sometimes they had the little binders that had 3 rockets in it, so you could have 6. But that was about the bulk of the armament. Offensive armament was either smoke rockets for marking a target, or an HE rocket for, you know, hitting something and running. And these are the kind of aircraft that don't really run very fast. They kind of hobble. But one of the things they did for self-defense, and Gene, I'll get your comments, and Stanley, just a minute, okay? One of the things they did for self-defense was the guy in the back, the Gib, he would carry a box full of hand grenades. And my grandpa used to say the hand grenades they had in Vietnam were like World War II vintage grenades brought forward. And the concept on the grenades was when you pulled the pin and let the spoon fly, right, thumb the clip, the fuse gave you 10 to 15 seconds before the grenade goes boom. And so if you started taking small arms fire from the ground, you would pull a pin and throw it out and start, you know, trying to suppress the gunfire. Well, the problem was, since they were operating with those World War II era ancient grenades, sometimes the grenades never went off. Sometimes they went off in that 10 to 15 seconds. And sometimes they went off as soon as the spoon flew. Boom! You never could tell. And so they were trying to come up with a way to keep the guys in the airplane safe, yet have a way to deliver the grenade to suppress fire till they could kind of get out of the area. And what they found was that these grenades, when you pulled the pin out, if you left the spoon attached on the side, it would fit perfectly into a peanut butter jar that came from the mess decks. And it could get in there, and the spoon would stay against the wall and stay attached to the grenade. The spring loading kept it there. And they would then fly over these areas, and if they started taking fire, they'd take the whole jar and throw the jar out the window. And when the jar hit the ground and it broke, the spoon flies off. And then if the grenade goes boom immediately, that's okay, it's on the ground, it's not in the back seat. Because they had a couple accidents. Grandpa says, you know, ask me how I know. So the problem was they were having a short supply of peanut butter. So it turns out my grandfather was not just any guy assigned. He was the freaking commander, as I learned this week, of the 19th TASS Light, the 19th Tactical Air Support Squadron Light. It was reconstituted 16 October 1964 in Bien Hoa, Vietnam. And 21 October 1964, Lieutenant Colonel Vince Mankowski was assigned. He was a major at the time and then later promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, but Major Vince Mankowski was assigned and later promoted as the commanding officer 21 October 1964. So they had so many aircraft, and as it turns out, they were all, in 64, they were all O-1 Bird Dogs. And many of you are familiar with that, also called, the Army called them the L-19 Grasshopper. They were all based on the Cessna 172 airframe. And as it turns out, the Cessna 172 basically has an ogive fuselage, typical, you know, civilian airplane, high wing. Well, the O-1, the L-19, the windows, instead of being part of that ogive shape of the fuselage, were actually canted out. So the fuselage came up square and the windows were canted out so that you could, you know, get over the edge of the skin of the airplane and look down as an observation plane. So the windows were canted out. And they would fly these things, and they had so many birds. They were, here's the part I found fascinating. I love this. So the 5th Army of the Republic of Vietnam, 5th ARVN, 10th ARVN, 25th ARVN, they had planes assigned to all those guys, and they were based all over the place in Vietnam. And their call signs were put together based on which ARVN and which location they flew out of. So 5th ARVN, all those aircraft were called Viper. But Viper 1, 2A, 2, 3, and 10 flew out of Binh Duong. Viper 5 and 8 flew out of Bin Long. And Viper 7 and 9 flew out of Song Bi. So, and I'm sharing this with you so you understand kind of the composition and how the command and control and all that worked, right? And then the 10th ARVN, where the call sign was all Copperhead, and the birds out of Bien Hoa, which is where Grandpa was out of, right? He was the CO at Bien Hoa, Vietnam, 1964. So the airplanes that they flew were Copperhead 3 through 12. 1 and 2 were in another location. And then the 25th ARVN were all Cobra call signs. And 1 and 2 were in one place, 3 through 6 were in another, and so on. So that was how these aircraft were all spread around. Now, as it turns out, when you had, if you were doing spotting for 11th Marines Artillery, the 11th Marines assigned a spotter, and he would come in to Bien Hoa, and he would fly with Copperhead 3. But in the back, he had a call sign like, Cottonmouth 12. Each of their spotters had their own unique call sign, and he operated a separate set of radios in the back to talk to his artillery units for dropping the artillery. They were intercom connected in the airplane, and then the pilot with his call sign and air traffic control, not air traffic control, but combat control, air traffic control in a combat zone. So, I mean, you talk about, so the pilot's got to talk with traffic control and with the guy in the back. The guy in the back's got to talk with the pilot and with his liaisons. They all have separate call signs. So you would have Cottonmouth 12 flying with Viper 3 on this particular mission. That was how convoluted this stuff got. But that was how they operated. And so here's the rest of the story. My grandpa, as the CO, was putting in requisition after requisition after requisition for peanut butter. And he had those, they were eating it on waffles, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They packed sandwiches to take with them on flights. They made peanut butter and jelly to take them to the locals and give to kids and families. And eat peanut butter, because they needed the peanut butter jars rinsed out to put the grenades in to fly for safety, so they wouldn't blow up in the airplane when they used them for defense. So then one day, they're flying along, Grandpa flying his airplane. I don't know what it's called, one of the Viper 3 through 10. So he was probably Viper 3 that day as the CO. And Viper 3 is in the air. They're going low and slow. And they're doing basically a reconnaissance, right? They're looking at an area. Are there enemy activities? Can you see troop movements? So it was a reconnaissance flight. And he's got some spotter guy in the back from the Marines who were in the area. All right, Douglas, enjoy. And this cat has like a soda case filled with glass jars, filled with grenades on his lap. And they're flying along in their O1. You say anything back there? Not really, over. And all of a sudden, they start taking small arms fire. Dow, ding, doo, dee, dow. And the guy in the back, he starts grabbing jars. He's like, there's one for you. There's one for you. Because those broken windows on the fuselage, well, they would, the window itself, even though it was canted out, you could kick it open. So there was a gap, like I'm showing you for one side of the fuselage, right? They'd kick that window open and they could toss these things out. So this guy is going, let's get rid of that gun and let's get rid of that gun. Take it easy, Mike. And next thing you know, all you hear is glass shatter. A round came through the fuselage and penetrated the box of grenades. And the dude in the back was like, whole thing out the window. And Grandpa's flying along. The plane doesn't go real fast. And it was like watching carpet bombing, because they're maybe 100 feet off the ground. It was like watching carpet bombing from an F-105 emptying his turrs. The grenades all boom, 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 boom. And Grandpa goes, what the hell did you do? And the guy's like, one of the jars took a round. And so my grandpa says, what'd you do? And he goes, I threw them all out. My grandpa said, what the hell did you do that for? And the guy says, I didn't have the time to figure out which jar was hit. He just heaved the whole thing before they blew up in his face. All right, Tim, take it easy, buddy. So that story, it was always one that made me laugh. The guy just heaving a bunch of peanut butter jars full of grenades out the window because he just does not have the time to figure out which glass got hit. So I'm thinking to myself, dagnabbit, I have never had a desire to build an O-1. They're just like the C-133. They're beautiful airplanes. I like them. I've seen other people build them. They're nice kits. I've seen them in the light gray for the Air Force. I've seen them in the green on gray for the Army versions. I've seen models at shows and online. I just have never had any desire to build one. And as it turns out, for a completely separate subject, I happen to have Model USA's O-1 Bird Dog in my stash. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, it'd be a long shot. It was still in the shrink wrap. So I went over to my stash this evening after I got off work, and I came down here and I pulled the shrink wrap off, and the first thing I did was open up the instructions, if I can get into them, and I went right to the colors and markings. I was going to chuckle. I had to laugh and see if this kit came with 19 TASS, the Tactical Air Service Squadron. Does it come with 19 TASS markings? That airplane right there. Bottom view, top view, side and side. This is a 19th TASS aircraft from 1966. And I went, you have to be kidding me. So I'm looking up the tail number, 76268. And wouldn't you know it, that not only is 76268 with the 19th TASS, 76268 flew out of Bien Hoa, which is where my grandfather was as the CO. So I started doing more Google searching. And this airplane, this kit, this markings comes with, I'll just be honest, these really cheesy, it's human teeth, not shark teeth, but these human teeth that go up on the nose of the airplane. And I was looking at that scheme and I went, that just really doesn't turn me on. But guess what? This is from 1966. My grandpa was the CO 64 to 65. And I found photograph today online of 76268 from 1965. That airplane, 76268. No shark mouth, no human teeth, no shark mouth on it. And I found with that airplane, the one that my grandpa probably flew as a CO of that squadron. And, you know, my dad used to get really excited about discovering things about my grandpa and his service. And when I built a model of an A-26 with the tail markings from photographs my dad provided to me. And when I posted pictures of it a little over a year ago, and Jonathan Claiborne in here comes in and goes, dude, I'm sorry, there was no airplane in Korea that had 3 letters on the tail like that. Because my grandpa's airplane had KP2, Kilo Papa 2 on the tail. And I went, yeah, it did, dude. You know, here's the photos. And well, Jonathan is a big A26 historical society. He runs the A26 Historical Society, and he has more photos and more info at his fingertips than you can shake a stick at. And it turns out that the plane, I had 2 different sets of pictures from 2 different eras, close, but still 2 different eras. The airplane with KP2 on the tail was the airplane my grandpa flew in Michigan at the training squadron when he transitioned from A-20s to A-26s. When he got to Korea and he was flying the bird that he named Boisan Ichiban, Jonathan provided me photographs. It was tail code F. And he also had photos that showed that his airplane had red wingtips, red tail tips, which I did not know before, and some red on the cowling, all stuff I did not know because I did not have photographic evidence of those areas. And so when I discovered this stuff, my dad had already passed away. And I dearly wish I could have shared this with my father. I know it would have he loves this kind of stuff. It would have just made his day. I really wish I could have shared that with him. And now that I keep digging, and my dad, the other story, I'll just share with you real quick before I sign off for tonight. When my grandpa came out of Vietnam, mind you, he was all over the world in World War II, flying A-20s and A-26s. Between World War II and Korea, he actually got out of service for a little while. The only job he could land was as a taxi cab driver. So he went back into service. And that's when he transitioned. And then the Korean War broke out. He was gone. And then between Korea and Vietnam, I mean, he was flying stuff with all over the world. his headstone marker at the Presidio in San Francisco reads like a who's who of U.S. military history from 42 to 72. And then he went to Vietnam. And he was over there twice, once with the TASS, and I've yet to discover who he was with the second time. But when he came off his second tour to Vietnam, my grandmother was like, you know, please stay home, quit leaving me. And so my grandpa got a new assignment, and they went to Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco for his new assignment. And they roll up in the car, a new station wagon, grandpa, grandma, and their youngest. They got my dad and his younger sister, my Aunt Jean. She was 10 years younger than my dad. And they step out of the car and they're looking at C-133s. And my grandpa goes, you know, May, what do you think? And my grandma was fresh off boat from Scotland. And she had this way about her. She would always tisk at people. She folded her arms. She's looking at the airplane. She looks at my grandpa and she says, that one's not designed for a lap around the flagpole, is it? She was so upset. He was going to be on these long range, long duration, you know, long bye-bye, because she's been begging him to stay home for a while. And my dad had told me that story, you know, because he was there and watched his mom say to his dad, you know, that one's not for a lap around the flagpole, is it? But that's how he wound up in the C-133s from O-1s out of Vietnam, because he tried to get away from deploying for combat, and he wound up flying Apollo lunar modules all over the place. Just incredible stuff. And I found these things this week, and I wished I could have shared it with my dad. I can't, since he passed a few years ago. You guys are my family. I'll share it with you guys. I think those are stories that just touched my heart, and thought I'd share them with you. And now those are two more reasons for two more subjects why I'm going to go ahead and build an O-1E of the 19th Tactical Aircraft Support Squadron Light in Vietnam. And I'm going to do a 144 scale C-133B flying out of Travis Air Force Base, California, because some pretty doggone cool stuff there and real motivation to go.
We hope you have enjoyed this Infinite Models presentation.